Hello, it's 9 p.m. in RTD. It's time to English New Edition for tonight headlines. We have the visit of the UNHCR Regional Director to Djibouti. For the international scene, first UN ship loaded with grain ready to depart from Ukraine. Welcome to our newsroom. The acting Minister of Interior, Mr. Omar Abdi Said, received this morning in his office the Regional Director of the UNHCR, Ms. Clementine Weta Salami. The Regional Director first expressed her sincere thanks to the Minister for his welcomes and hospitality. She cited the Republic of Djibouti as a model in the implementation of the comprehensive framework of actions for refugees. She paid tribute to the many measures aimed at strengthening the protection and benefits granted to refugee population, including access to basic services such as health and education. The acting Minister of Interior expressed his pleasure to meet with the UNHCR Regional Director, and both parties discussed bilateral relations. The visit ended with the traditional family photo. A strong delegation of officials led jointly by the prefect of the region, Musa Adan Migane, and the executive secretary of the National Office for Assistance of Refugee and Disaster Victims visited the refugee camp of Ali Adde on Sunday afternoon. The delegation is composed of the director of the Regional Office of East Horn of Africa and Great Lakes of the High Commissioner for Refugees, Ms. Clementine Weta Salami, the representative of the UNHCR in Djibouti, Johan Dankul Sakor, other senior officials of the UN agencies at the entrance of the refugee camp of Ali Adde. The members of this strong delegation were warmly welcomed by the deputy sub-prefect of the sector, the administrator of similar camps established in the countries, the heads of the humanitarian organization operating in these places, many agents of the offices of UNHCR, and honest men and women leaders from the community of internally displaced people. The men and women welcomed the director of the Regional Office for East Horn of Africa and Great Lakes of the UNHCR in this camp, hosting 3 communities of refugees from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. A few moments later, the distinguished visitor and her companions were ushered into the room in the administrative centers of the camp, where a group of men and women and young people representing their respective communities settled in their different refugee centers in the countries, namely the camp of Ali Adde, Holhol, and Markazi, were waiting for them. The High Commissioner for Refugees, Ms. Clementine Weta Salami, thanked the regional authorities and the refugee for their warm welcome, and said that the UN agency she will continue to provide all kinds of aid and will intensify its support for the different refugee camps on Djibouti soil. On his side, the prefect of the Ali Sabih region, Musa Adan Migane, welcomed the regional directors of the delegation, reiterating the unwavering support of the Djiboutian government to all kinds of refugees living in Djibouti. On August 8, 2022, the Directorate of Anti-Terrorism Coordination and Fight Against Organized Crimes dismantled a network of counterfeiters of banknotes. A total of 4 individuals were arrested in the framework of a flagrant delicto investigations, which allow it to determine the role of each one in these unhealthy enterprises. The group is composed of counterfeit was to forge banknotes of Djibouti franc and US dollars, carriers and several accomplices whose task was to put in circulation the counterfeit bills in the market of Djibouti city. In addition, as part of this investigation, several individuals are actively presented to the prosecutor's office. On August 11, 2022, a judicial investigation was opened against the main authors under the head of the counterfeiting and falsification of coins or banknotes having legal tenders in the Republic of Djibouti or issued by foreign and international institutions authorized for this purpose against accomplice to have transported, put into the circulation or held with a view to putting into the circulation counterfeit or falsified monetary signs with the aggravating circumstances that the fact were committed in an organized gang. It should be recalled that under Article 277 and 278 of the Penal Code, the counterfeiting and falsification of coins or banknotes that are legal tenders in the Republic of Djibouti or issued by foreign or international institutions authorized for this purpose is punishable by 20 years imprisonment and 15 million Djibouti franc that the transport, the put in place into the circulation or the detention with the view to putting into the circulation of the counterfeit or falsified monetary sign referred to the Article 277 is punishable by 10 years imprisonment and a fine of 20 million Djibouti franc when committed in an organized gang. The same acts are punishable by 20 years of criminal imprisonment and a fine of 15 million Djibouti franc. It is brought to the attention of the Djiboutian that the counterfeiting and circulation of the counterfeit banknote is an extremely serious criminal act punishable by the most several penalties, 20 years in prison. This Sunday, August 14, the Youth Movement One and Indivisible, in collaboration, organized a consultation and awareness conference as part of the celebration of the International Youth Day at the Al-Rahma complex under the theme Generational Solidarity, creating a world for all ages. This theme emphasizes that no generation should be left behind in the race to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This conference brought together civil society leaders, youth leaders from 2 municipalities, young academics, young professionals, local elected officials, and senior officials around the theme of intergenerational solidarity. The event took place in the presence of the president of the movement of Youth One and Indivisible, Mr. Ahmed Mogola, the vice president of the municipality of Balbala, Mr. Suleiman Ali Suleiman, the vice president in charge of coordination of the movement of Youth One and Indivisible, Mr. Mohammed Ali Mohammed, the elected dynamics of municipalities of Balbala, Abdurrahman, and elected officials. For his part, the Vice President of the Commune of Balbala, Mr. Suleiman Ali Suleiman, urged the youth of the Commune of Balbala to strengthen intergenerational solidarity and show patriotism and unity to persevere peace for the development of our commune and our country. In his opening remarks, the president of the Youth Movement One and Indivisible, Mr. Ahmed Mogola, explained that young people are a positive force for development and that solidarity, collaboration, and transmission of knowledge between generations are essential for the preservation of peace and development of our country. The rainfall situation in Djibouti during this summer month of August 2022, the sky is clear and the rains of Karma season have affected the majority of our country from the north and south as well as the capital. These rains came at the right times for the rural and nomadic families who were suffering the fuel forces of the drought. These rains have sprinkled the entire national territories and should promote the growth of grasses and plants likely to improve the feeding of livestock, sources of food for our fellow the temperature high heat in this month of August. If these rains are godsend in rural areas, they are nevertheless causing difficulties in the capitals and the main roads. The rains are causing difficulties in the capital because of the flooding of the main roads and some neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods were flooded in the capital, some neighborhoods were flooded in the capital, and the rainwaters was visible on the road and the popular neighborhoods are sources of inconvenience for the movement. All the services concerned ONIAD, ADER, and civil protectionists were mobilized to empty the rainwaters and help restore the fluidity of traffic and pedestrian movement in the faces of the momentary stoppage of public transport in the capital. During this evening rains, the police provided residents with the means of transport to get, especially between Balbala and capital. In the whole countries, the sky was mild in the 5 regions, with the record rainfall reaching 100 millimeter in some areas like Grambara. All the wadis were mostly in the floods in the regions, with the two victims and disruptions on the road traffic. The southern corridor linking Djibouti and Ethiopia was disrupted, and traffic was blocked at between Yoboki and Gorabus. The prefect of Dakhil, accompanied by the DPCR team, went and opened the way by setting up a crossing point. The rainfall was more pronounced in the regions on the Grand Bara had become a lake. Only the road that crosses in the reservoir were all in water. Is the sub-prefecture of Dorra, where the drought was severe and the lack of water forced nomadic families to travel 10 kilometers to access water. Some families transit to neighboring countries because of the lack of water. The rain of karma will change the living conditions of the thousands of families in rural areas, with the availability of access stored in sufficient quantity in the many hydraulic works and carried out in Garabtisan, Balho, Malaho, still on the plain of Doda, between Balho and Durra and Dabba, and the foothills of Musa Ali. In addition, the Obok region is benefited from rainfall in the Mulhule, Angaru sector, and even in Mabla sector. Overall, despite 2 victims of the floods and some inconvenience in the capitals and traffic difficulties on some roads, the rains of karma will allow a clear improvement in the living conditions of our compatriots, especially in rural areas, and reduce the high heat that was suffering many Djiboutian families. Djibouti is facing the multiplications of fire. There is hardly a week without a fire being declared, even if these fires are of average magnitude. Their sources remains disturbing. Most of them are electrical fraud that results in a rather tragic drama. By wanting to defraud the electricity for a few hours of air conditioning, we end up with his families and neighbors in the streets with the destructions of all their property. In this case, it is no longer a simple fraud, but rather is an attack on the life of others. If it also known that the weather is of these times, with these kinds of hamsin blowing at high speeds, constitute another potential danger that multiplies any fires or simple kitchen fires. The practices of shisha and its ember fires is another source of danger that can easily end in a disaster. Here are rarely the main causes of these fires. Outbreaks causes of also much more dangerous than others that the population does not take into the consideration. The firefighters always on alert 24 hours a day are confronted with the fires caused by our lack of awareness. In addition to this state of affairs, our firefighters are confronted with the problems of urban roads. It is in these kinds of origin, in the unconsciousness of some our fellow citizens, that our firefighters struggle all week long. The firefighters are also confronted with the other obstacles, such as the obstructions of access roads. Construction materials are often deposited on the road, making rescue impossible due to lack of access road. In addition, there is the problem of crowd, and especially of children who are close to death by squeezing through the big trucks. So manufacturers that constitute an obstacle to emergency recourse. Faced with this state of affairs, the directions of civil protection should begin a broad campaign with the media, of course, but also with the ulemas, youth association and women, but also with the prefectures and the mayor's office to awaken the collective consciousness of our fellow citizens and educate them on the origins of fires and organizations of rescue. The summer period is synonymous with the internal mobilization of the population forced to leave the capital, which is very busy during this period to spend their holidays in the north of the regions of Tajara, in particular in Randa, Dai, or in the Greater We'ima. The sub-region is coveted for its mild and pleasant climate. Many Djiboutians spend these last times their big vaccinations in the north of the regions of Tajara, especially in the villages such as the sub-prefecture of Randa, Dai, We'ima, Mabla, or they are often installed in rented homes that are reserved for them to spend a stay in all quietness, far from and sound. This stay of the also benefited the small businessmen and stock breeders of the regions who benefited in this short period of time and economic fallout, such as they are taking part in the cultural event denominating the Siga, often organized in the consumes. The vaccine allows many people to connect with the natures and the rural world. The Summer Games in Rwanda, Adaitoli dominates Leicester and retains its title under a clear sky. The file of Sura hosted yesterday the final of the third edition of the tournament dedicated to the memory of the late Demha. Organized under the auspices of the State Secretariat for Sports by the youth of Rwanda. The tournament was at its final stage. The final opposed the team of Leicester to Adaitoli. The title's holder, the player of Adaitoli, started their games, creating opportunities and putting their opponents in difficulties. It was in the 22nd minute that their favorite attack chose its moment to shine. The Adaitolian took the advantage on the scoreboards on this stroke of genius and never let go, even when they were in great difficulties, thanks to a good team's cohesion and especially to their confirmed defensive solidity. The final was held in front of an audience of prestigious guests, including officials of the State Secretariat for Sports, local authorities, and wise men, but especially under the thunderous cheers of a crowd in effervescence. It should be noted that through these kinds of events, the State Secretariat in charge of sports, in collaboration with the local association, aims to entertain young people during their vacations and encourage them to clean up their villages while ensuring the detections of nuggets. For the international scene, the first UN ship loaded with the grain ready to leave Ukraine, the MV Brava Commanders, has been loaded with the 23,000 tons of wheat and is preparing to leave Ukraine to deliver its cargo to Djibouti. From the grain will be transferred to Ethiopia. This is the first food aid shipment to leave Ukraine since a tripartite agreement on the export of Ukrainian grain was signed in July. This is one of the results of the tripartite agreement signed by the Russian, Ukrainian, and Turkish under the aegis of the UN on July 2020. The first humanitarian ship chartered by the United Nations to transport Ukrainian grain was loaded with the 23 tons of wheat on Sunday, August 14. It is ready to go to sea, announced the Ukrainian Minister of Infrastructure. And to close up this edition, Spain evacuations of some 1,500 people due to an extremely violent forest fires in Zaragoza. A forest fire in the Spanish province of Zaragoza led to the evacuations of some 1,500 residents on Saturday and Sunday, while hundreds of Others are about to leave their homes by Sunday evening. Authorities were most concerned that the fire would spread into the Moncayo Natural Park, which is full of flammable vegetation and exceptional biodiversity. The fire has a radius of about 15 kilometers and has already ravaged about 8,000 hectares of land and forest. Since Saturday, strong winds gusts of up to 60 kilometers per hour have complicated the situation. Meteorologists expect the winds to increase in intensity on Sunday night, making conditions more difficult for more than 300 firefighters battling the blaze. This is it for the news. Thanks for watching us. Have a good evening.